Abroad Pod.
Hello, listener. Thank you so much for joining us on this 39th edition of the Teaching Abroad Pod, coming at you on Wednesday, November 16th. I'm your host, Rowan Lomas, and with me once again this week is my colleague Lucas from the Oxford Seminars Job Placement Service. How are things going with you, Luke?
Great. Enjoying the last remnants of the summer before it disappears completely. How about you?
Well, there's no shortage of summer here in Costa Rica, but actually, we recently went to somewhere even hotter. We went on a short trip to Panama. Being so close by in Costa Rica, it was, just quick and easy place to go, or so we thought.
Yeah.
It's usually nice to be on such a short flight, just over an hour, and the trip over was a breeze. On the way back, however, the Tompkins International Airport in Panama City was apparently delaying departures much of the morning due to some weather-related issues. So our boarding was delayed by about an hour, and then we sat on the plane on the tarmac for another 2 hours roughly
Oh my God.
before takeoff. So that was a bit of a bummer. Thankfully, their in-flight entertainment system was functional, so I watched some of American Made or something with Tom Cruise. That was interesting.
Oh, I'd never even heard of it.
Check it out. But on a more positive note, I guess, just before our trip, Panama had removed all pre-boarding vaccine or negative COVID test requirements, as well as the health affidavit requirements, which had previously been in place. So Panama does seem to be joining a long list of countries doing away with COVID-related travel mandates. That said, many others still have some sort of COVID-related travel requirements in place, so that's definitely something you should research before flying out and buying a plane ticket. And of course, that doesn't mean individual schools or school authorities won't require some sort of proof of vaccination or masking, etc. So that's definitely something worth inquiring about at the interview stage if you're applying for a job.
Yes, it's always good to have that just in case, I would say. So apart from the flight delays, any positive sights seen from your trip?
For sure. The first site we went to see in Panama City was the Biomuseo, which is this beautiful Frank Gehry designed building with his trademark style, whereby elements of the design appear to be fragmented with flowing lines and blobist modular parts. So that is really quite a sight to behold, sitting along a coastal causeway on the Pacific coast. And that museum, I believe, has 8 exhibits about Panamanian biodiversity with a really cool surround video theater where you get to see things like leafcutter ants sort of running around underfoot. And there's some neat interactive exhibits that you can learn a lot about the history of the volcanic formation of the land, as well as humans and nature developing in this isthmus where Central and South America meet.
So you'd mentioned this was a Frank Gehry designed building. So personally, I don't know a lot about him. So could you tell us a little bit more or why that was important to you?
To be honest, I probably wanted to see it as much for the architecture as for the exhibits. Him being from Toronto originally and famous for the Art Gallery of Ontario building, there's this kind of sense of pride in seeing his work around the world. And as he's an American, I'm sure our listeners in the US can be proud to call him their own as well, considering his very famous works such as the Guggenheim in Bilbao, Spain. Interestingly, one of the front desk staff at our hotel said he chose to do the Biomuseo probably because his wife is Panamanian. So it seems there are a few countries that have a bit of pride in their connection to this very celebrated modern architect.
Did you go anywhere else that was interesting on your trip?
I guess the other notable excursion we took was to the world famous Panama Canal. We went to the visitors center at the Miraflores Locks, where they have a museum showing the history of the canal from when construction first began by the French in the 1880s to completion by the Americans in 1914 through to current day developments such as Panama taking control in 99 and the opening of a wider channel for larger ships and water saving techniques by reusing water in pools to refill the locks. So yeah, it was really cool to watch a large ship getting lowered from the lake above the locks down to the canal that meets the Pacific. Definitely a worthwhile trip, especially for history buffs, I would say.
Oh wow, yeah. I mean, I would love to see it. I'm always fascinated with history. So it does sound like you had a worthwhile visit. Up next, we'll be sharing an interview with the teacher, writer, and world traveler Mia Townsend about her experiences teaching and living in a number of different environments, including Japan, Thailand, Costa Rica, online, and her tips and tricks for success as a globetrotter. But first, a word from our sponsor.
With Oxford Seminars, starting your new career teaching ESL couldn't be easier. Oxford Seminars has trained more than 70,000 teachers over the past 30 years, and you could be next. Our comprehensive 120-hour program starts with live instruction from an experienced ESL teacher, followed by convenient online modules. If your goal is to relocate overseas or even teach from the comfort of your own home, Oxford Seminars' renowned lifetime job placement service will get you where you want to be. Right now, you can get $50 off your Oxford Seminars TESL, TESL, TEFL course price when paying in full by calling 1-888-225-2480 and giving the code TEACHINGABROADPOD. Visit oxfordseminars.com today to find out more.
Welcome back, listeners. We are now joined by writer, teacher, drone pilot, mental health advocate, and globetrotter extraordinaire Mia Townsend. Mia began traveling at a young age on a language exchange trip to Costa Rica as a 12-year-old and continued traveling throughout her teens and 20s. She is a proponent of slow travel, having called South Africa, Thailand, Japan, and the USA home. She has a degree in international studies from Hope College, and you can find her newsletter online at miaonthemap.com. Welcome to the pod, Mia.
Thank you so much for having me. I can't wait to chat about travel and living abroad.
Yes, welcome. And yeah, we're looking forward to hearing your stories. So let me just open it up then. Can you tell us a bit about your early experiences teaching abroad? What was your first experience like, specifically in Japan?
Ooh, yeah. So a little backstory. Before going to Japan, I had spent about 6 months teaching English in rural Georgia, the USA. And so I did have a little bit of background and experience teaching. Japan was a whole nother ballgame in the best way possible. I was really looking forward to living in a country that was kind of polar opposite, still is, of the US culture in many ways. And I think teaching gave me a unique insight into the culture that I wouldn't have had the opportunity to find out about had I not been teaching. I had a really special experience getting invited into like students' homes or having unique connections with locals that I think would take a bit more effort had I just been kind of traveling around. But I think after a certain level of trust is built, people want to welcome you in a bit more and share about their culture. And that was by far like the best part of living there.
Okay. And where did you say you were in Japan?
I was in a small town in Gifu Prefecture, so the town was called Ogaki.
Huh.
I actually didn't think it was that small, but all of my Japanese friends said, yes, we're in the countryside. But it was pretty similar to my hometown growing up, so I really enjoyed living there.
Yeah, I feel like small for Japan is still about 500,000 people.
Yeah, you're not wrong about that.
Yeah, it was the same for me where I taught in Korea. My city is about 100,000 people, which was considered rural by Korean standards. Where I'm from, that's a pretty medium-sized city,
Right.
and it's often the biggest city for miles around.
Yeah, that was similar to where I was. Although I did have a lot of rice fields nearby, and I biked to work every day. It kind of made that commute
So
a
what
lot
kind
more
of school
beautiful.
were you teaching at there?
It was a private English school, I guess kind of what people would call like an eikaiwa or juku. And so my day started around noon prepping for classes, and my first students, if I didn't have any adult students, it would start with preschool. And my day ended at 10 p.m. with high school. So just moved up with different levels throughout the day. The hours were so different for me from what I was used to doing. But it was a great experience, I think.
And did you get TEFL certified before starting your first teaching job in Japan?
So I get asked this a lot. I actually didn't get TEFL certified until quite a while after going, and I don't recommend that.
Mm.
I had some teacher training in college. I spent 2 years studying special education, which included doing field placements. Had I not had that experience, I think moving abroad and starting to teach without being TEFL certified would have been a challenge. I found my first year teaching abroad classroom management was, oof, that was a tough one. I think my number one lesson was don't feel like you have to be liked. Don't try to be friends with your students at the get-go. I think as long as you can focus on the lessons you want to teach and building respect in the classroom, that's like a good place to
Yeah,
start.
I would say classroom management is definitely one of the key components of a good, solid TEFL course. And
Yeah.
Mm.
I made the same mistake you did, to be honest. Before I went to Korea, I had not taken a course, and that was one of my biggest challenges.
Mm-hmm.
Same here, actually. Yeah.
Oh,
I
I'm
did the
glad I'm
JET
not alone.
program. Yeah, the first year I was clueless. I would have loved to have had this kind of experience.
Yeah, if anyone's listening and you're considering moving abroad, get that TEFL certificate.
Mm. So you already taught, you taught in Japan, but you also taught in Thailand as well. Is that right?
Yes. So my experience teaching in Thailand was quite different from a lot of
Mm.
teachers that I know who were working in more
Mm.
traditional school settings. In Japan, I was working with children and young adults who came from very kind of privileged backgrounds.
Mm.
In Thailand, I was working with students who were either stateless or had refugee status, who
Mm.
had come from Myanmar, Burma, or who had grown up in the refugee camps in Thailand, which a lot of people don't even know Thailand has. Before I started teaching in Japan, that experience I had in Georgia was working with this same population from
Mm.
Myanmar, Burma. Were just resettled in the US.
Mm.
So I had this connection that I wanted to continue to build upon, and that's how I ended up in Thailand after Japan. Uh, it's just two very different cultural contexts. It's hard to
Mm.
describe, but I picture Japan as being like when I lived there, I would bike to work every day, be in a classroom with plenty of electronics. It was
Mm.
cozy and clean. And I think where I worked in Thailand, although we didn't have all those resources there, there was a lot more interaction with the students. I was working at a boarding school there.
Mm.
So I think because of that, it gave students the chance to be creative in the classroom and to kind of develop their own learning style, their own projects, it was just neat after classes ended to see people playing music or coming up with ideas for like a school talent
Mm.
show or playing cane ball outside. And it's hard to
You're
Mm.
like
compare them
part
when I
of the
think of.
community in a sense, you know, seeing them outside of class, around the school every day, things like that.
Yeah, felt more, it kind of developed more of a sense of like family-like structure, whereas
Mm.
Japan, I mean, I think in general, there's a bit more of a barrier with getting to know people on a friendship level. I think that takes
Mm.
time to build, whereas Thailand, with the students that I was working with, it was instant.
Mm.
So no bad way of doing it. They were just both very different.
Mm. Mm. Well, also too, how did it compare to teaching ESL in the States?
You know, where I was teaching in the States, it was also not a high-tech school. It was chalkboard and one table. And because I was working with immigrant population or population that just arrived in the US, most of our lessons were centered around, basic understanding like safety protocol, getting immersed in the culture.
Mm.
And my students were rotated out like every couple of months. So it made the lessons that I taught a bit different, but I kind of had to be creative in what I was doing. And that was similar with Thailand. I ended up making a curriculum for the school
Mm.
just to help other teachers. But in more of the traditional school setting, when I was doing special education in a classroom, there was a lot more structure and I think a lot more rules that people ended up having to abide by. So
Just curious, going back to Thailand, how would you find a job in that kind of teaching environment? It's not, you know, the typical thing you see on job boards.
Yeah, it's not. You're right. So I ended up asking a lot of my friends who are Karen. Karen is the ethnic group that I was working with.
Mm,
And most of them had family or friends who were still in the refugee camps in Thailand who
mm,
connected me with
mm,
one opportunity that I was initially going to go with, but then there was a lot of changes in the within the Thai government, and so the camps kind of closed off to foreigners.
mm.
So then I continued networking a bit and was pointed in the direction of a school that was on Workaway. I don't know if either of you have heard of Workaway. Yeah,
Oh yeah.
it's a great way to find like work exchange. So
So it's like a working
Interesting.
holiday.
yeah, yeah, and I ended up traveling back and forth quite a bit to kind of be able to stay longer. But yeah,
Mm,
normally 3 months is the length of the tourist visa. So if you do a
mm,
tourist or like a volunteer teaching position, the tourist visa is 3 months. So you'd have to make a plan to get that extended somehow at the end of 3 months.
mm.
I guess something that doesn't require any visa runs really. It's teaching online. You spent 4 years teaching online
Mhm.
for a Chinese company. Is there any advice you would offer to any of our graduates who are considering doing something like that?
Yeah, yeah. So teaching online has been a really great outlet to just keep up with learning about other cultures while making some money. I was working for VIP Kids for about 4 years, and
Mhm.
that company, along with a lot of other Chinese-based companies, had a bunch of changes this past year, and so I kind of faded that out for me. But I started working with another company called Cambly, and I started my own business,
Mm,
which allowed me to kind of set more of a fair price for myself and to be able to teach in my time zone. That was the hardest part if you're going to teach online,
mm.
just to be aware, like wherever you're living, you're going to be having to teach to the time zone that the company's based in
I
normally.
guess a lot of
Mm,
the higher paying students tend to be in Asia, which tends to be
Yes.
not the most convenient time zone for North Americans.
Yeah, I tried to sustain that while I was traveling, but I was in Asia, so the time difference it was perfect for me. And then I
mm,
came back to the US right at the start of the pandemic, and I tried to keep up with teaching with that company for a good 6 months with the same time zone. And let me tell you, that was not great for my mental health. I think
mm,
staying up in the middle of the night while everybody's sleeping and working through that, it was challenging. But a lot of people find ways to make it work for them if they do choose a company
mm,
based in Asia. You
mm,
can make it work, but for me, I had done it for quite some time and realized it's better to start my own business with that.
mm. Yeah, it's more suitable for some people than others, I suppose. If you're a night
Mhm.
owl, maybe that sort of thing.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And right now, I tend to
Mm,
recommend the company Cambly because you don't have to get your own students. I
mm,
mean, you do, but it's a bit easier, and you can start teaching immediately after
mm,
you get approved. So Cambly is a good option, but the pay is a bit low.
mm. Yeah, that's one thing I've noticed with some of the online jobs. But having your own online business, that must have been helpful in that regard, you said. So how hard was it to start that up?
Um, I needed a couple of weeks just to
Mm,
market enough to get a stable student base. And
mm,
thankfully, because I had already been teaching students in China, I had a WeChat account set up, and WeChat is just
mm,
a great resource to use to get students who are based in China. And
mm,
yeah, it took me a couple of weeks, and then had about 4 to 6 students regularly, which
mm,
was enough already to with the rates that I was charging, it was fine to kind of live off of for a time while I transitioned into doing writing work. So,
mm.
How
yeah.
did you market yourself in China?
On WeChat, you can kind of put out posts like you would on Facebook or Instagram, and I did that for a bit, and because I had taught with VIP Kid for 4 years, most of the people that I was friends with on WeChat were former students or their
Mm.
parents, and so they recommended me to their friends and their friends' children, and so it worked out really, really well.
A lot of word of mouth, so to speak, word of WeChat.
It was very, yeah, it was very helpful having that background. It can be tricky to find ways to market to new students, but word of mouth really, it's very powerful, I think, with starting a company and having it be trusted too.
Especially with tight-knit communities and like countries in Asia, like a lot of people know each
Yeah.
other really well, and there's a lot of talk that goes on. So especially in the ESL community, you could probably get a good toehold, I would imagine.
Yes. Yeah. And I ended up making my own website as well just to answer questions more easily. And so people could kind of just send a link to other people who are interested and kind of came up with little special like referral gifts. Like if you refer one friend, you'll get one free class or things like that. So I don't have a background in business. It did take me some time to kind of find the right path, but it worked out well for a time.
You already kind of touched on schedule a little bit, but when do you really have to be available, let's say Beijing time, to get a good number of students in China?
Um, I would say, so what worked best for me was waking up around like 5 a.m. and teaching from around 5 to 9 was
5
normally
Eastern?
5 a.m. 5 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. Yeah. I tried 4:30 for a time and that wasn't doing it. But I also know a couple of other people who start teaching around 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time and go until like midnight. So it's really up to you. Weekends are a lot more flexible because students are not at school. A lot of Chinese students too go to many Chinese students that I know of go to boarding schools. And so sometimes when they're at a boarding school, they can't take extra classes, but if they come home for the weekend, that's when they'll want to sign up. So Saturdays and Sundays are also good for teaching.
So if you could, block off during the week 5 to 8, let's say in the morning, and 7 to 10 at night, 6 hours a day, those you wouldn't have too much trouble filling those 6 hours a day and getting a fairly full-time job out of it?
Yeah, so in the past, when I was working with platforms, if you're just starting off and where the company's at right now, I think it will take some time to build up client base. If you already have that client base, yeah, that would be the perfect time. Those would be the perfect times to teach. And I didn't have much trouble getting that work, but I know things are a bit different now.
Well, I think you're referring to when the Chinese government put some restrictions in place for tutoring children in China by foreign teachers, right?
Yeah, so a lot of Chinese-based companies actually ended up closing. VIP Kid transitioned into becoming more of a global network. So it was interesting. I was used to teaching just students from China, but at some point it changed a bit. And so I had students from Ecuador and one student from Mexico, which was interesting. It was just a really interesting change. But I know they're still working on building up their student base again.
Well, it helps now that it's reopened, essentially.
Yeah.
Let's see. You taught in Costa Rica, I'm seeing here, and Rowan happens to be there right now. So what were some of the highlights from your time there?
Yeah, so I taught online in Costa Rica. I was about like 40 minutes from San Jose in Heredia. So I wasn't in like the typical beachside setting that a lot of people I think picture from Costa Rica. I had been living in Michigan and teaching online and not getting enough sleep and just not I knew I kind of wanted a change, so I bought a one-way ticket to Costa Rica and hope for the best, and ended up trying out some Spanish classes and dance classes and staying
Did
with
they
a
not
host
ask
family.
you how you were going to leave the country in 3 months?
Well, so I bought a one-way ticket, but sometimes I would just buy like a cheaper ticket to a neighboring country,
Hmm.
just so there's that end date. Because I wasn't sure if I wanted to try to stay there for a longer period of time. I did interview for a teaching job there and ended up deciding to come back instead. But I do miss it. I left some of my stuff there, so
Hmm.
Just
I
wanted
need
to
to go
give a
back and
little
get it.
warning because I've noticed myself coming into Costa Rica recently. They are really asking that question, like when is your ticket out?
Yeah,
Like
most
they're not letting
places.
that one slide as much as they might have used to.
Are you planning on staying there for a good bit?
I'm not sure exactly how long. Probably a few more months at least.
Okay.
So that may require visiting somewhere else. So before I come back to my homeland.
Yeah. Which city are you in? I'm just
I'm
curious.
actually west of San Jose in Alajuela
Okay.
province.
Oh, oh, it's so pretty there. I mean, it's parts of it.
Absolutely.
Hmm.
Yeah, I really enjoyed the wildlife, that's for sure.
Yeah, I hope to go back, but yeah, you're right. Costa Rica, a lot of other countries do have that requirement where you need to have an exit ticket to show, and so
Hmm.
I always recommend just getting a ticket to like a neighboring country, and
One thing I've
that could
seen
be
a
a fun
lot of
adventure too.
people do too, whether Costa Rica or other countries, a cheaper way to do it can be to buy like a bus ticket to a neighboring country or
Yes.
something which you can probably cancel. And if not, it's not that expensive.
Yeah, there are certain, well, I don't know if I should recommend this, but there are certain plane tickets you can buy and cancel it within 24 hours. So,
That's true.
Hmm.
yeah.
Hmm.
But no, of course, one thing that we are considering doing is the digital nomad visa. So that
Yes.
may be another route, depending on how much it costs and things. So we're kind of weighing our options.
I'm pretty excited
Hmm.
for that just to come out. I've already made a list of some countries I want to visit with a digital nomad visa. So,
Hmm.
yeah, Costa Rica is definitely one I would like to stay in longer.
Now, you mentioned you're a drone pilot. How is that
Yes.
something that is relevant to traveling abroad?
So I got this drone last year. I've been flying it for about a year, and I actually won it in a giveaway. And I also
Hmm.
won about a week-long training with someone named Christine Lozada, who's an awesome drone content creator. So she has been able to travel the world with her drone, creating content for YouTube and Instagram, and also doing some really interesting work with, I think it's One Blue Ocean. She
Hmm.
was kind of scouting out manta rays and using her
Hmm.
drone to track them. So there's just so much you can do with a drone, and a lot that I didn't realize until I got it.
Hmm.
So it's opened up a lot of doors. I'm currently in Indiana, and it's just been really empowering to be able to see my hometown from an entirely new perspective. And something else that I really like, there's apparently only 7% of drone pilots are female. And so I'm happy to be boosting that percentage a bit and wanting
Hmm.
to kind of teach others how to fly too, because
Trailblazer.
Yeah.
That's
trying. But yeah, it's been interesting. I think a lot of people have mixed views on drones. I used to have mixed views on drones too, and but it's really neat to be able to use it from a photography standpoint. You're able to see so much more, and
I wouldn't
it's
mind
been
getting
fun
my
to
pizza that way, to be honest.
fly. Hey, that's probably coming.
Another thing on your website you mentioned is that you're a mental health advocate working your way through anxiety one country at a time. I know for some traveling and living in a new cultural and linguistic environment, that itself can bring on a lot of anxiety. So what advice do you have for people who tend to experience anxiety or other mental health issues with regards to having the best experience possible while teaching abroad?
Yeah, anxiety is can just be so annoying. You want to have a great experience, and then you just have this anxious feeling where you're worried or you get nervous. And travel in general has helped me because it's shown me that, man, not everything goes wrong when you hop on that plane and go to a new
Hmm.
country. And if it does, like, you're gonna figure it out. You're gonna figure it out. And
Hmm.
two things really helped me. One was before I went anywhere, before I go anywhere abroad, I try to make some connections with locals or expats already living there, because I think that anxiety, a lot of that comes from the fear of the unknown, and your brain kind of builds up these stories that may not necessarily be true, but until you experience a place for yourself, you won't know. So those connections really helped get a lot of my expectations. I think I was able to have more of a realistic expectation and an invitation from locals of, oh, once you get here, I'd love to show you this city, or I'd love to show you this restaurant. So that's my number one recommendation. And the second one is to just visualize things going well. I know it sounds silly, but it's been very helpful for me to just picture, okay, this is what it looks like if everything goes right. Because if you have anxiety, you're thinking, oh, everything's going to go wrong. But like, what if it all goes right? So I think that's been helpful.
Yeah. And I find the more you travel, like the more you find, yeah, it usually goes pretty good.
Yeah. Right. And you walk away with some incredible memories. So yeah, travel's definitely changed me for the better.
Well, I think that's it for our questions today. Mia, did you have any last things you wanted to mention before we let you go?
I just want to say, for anyone who's on the fence of taking that teaching job abroad or traveling to a new country, just go, just do it. Like you're going to have an incredible experience, and you won't know where it could take you in the future. Yeah, my life has just been the best because I had that first experience abroad. It led me to so many other paths. So do it.
Awesome.
It's a common theme we hear from a lot of people. Yeah,
absolutely.
Yay.
Well, thank you so much for taking the time to chat with us today, Mia. It was great having you and hearing your insights about teaching and living in Asia, as well as Costa Rica and teaching online.
Thanks for having me. It was really fun reflecting on all of this. So if anyone wants any questions answered or wants to know more, you can find me at Mia on the Map.
Okay, and we hope you stay in touch. Yeah, we'd love to have you back on again sometime.
Definitely. Thank
for
you.
Sure. Have a great day. Before we go, we do have a little job placement update for those job seekers who may be listening. What would you like to share with us today, Luke?
Well, at the time of recording, we are seeing a big need in applications to China and Hong Kong specifically, and the recruiters there are offering some very nice incentives, such as signing bonuses, paid flights, and paid accommodations. Many schools both there and elsewhere in East Asia are already well into hiring for the spring. In Thailand, although the fall semester has already begun, there are still a few unfilled openings, especially in rural areas of Thailand. So if a quieter lifestyle appeals to you and your documents are ready to go, then you should give it a try. They will also soon be interviewing for their spring semester, which starts later than most in May. So if you're considering making an application, there is no time like the present.
Thanks for tuning in to the Teaching Abroad Pod. We'll be releasing new episodes every third Wednesday. If you enjoyed this episode, please be sure to like and subscribe, and also share it with your friends. Remember, you can find us on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, Stitcher, etc. If you have any great ideas you'd like to hear us discuss in upcoming episodes, please leave them in the comments on YouTube. Send them in the comments to Oxford Seminars on Facebook, Instagram, or Twitter, or email us at teachingabroadpod@oxfordseminars.com. Thanks for listening.
All right. Thank you.